It's going to be a little bit different. I am going to air an interview I did with Justin Warren. He's a director, a filmmaker, and a writer. He made this great movie called When There Was Joe, or excuse me, Then There Was Joe. I can speak really. Then There Was Joe. And I want to share that with you. I'm playing that live as the live stream today. Just, I really wanted to share this interview with you. There is no real formal introduction to Justin. He's an amazing guy, super honest. Had an awesome conversation with him here. Again, he wrote this awesome movie called Then There Was Joe. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment. I know Justin would be thrilled to answer them. I will do my best as well. Thanks again, and have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the interview.
Who DP'd, then there was Joe. He like I've come to realize that like nothing is set in stone until it's happening. Like totally. So like I had a project at a production company, script and everything, script, budget, all that stuff, ready to go. And then the pandemic happened. And so the movie got canceled. So like that was like a very heartbreaking thing to occur. But you start to realize that like, you know, whenever a door shuts, another one opens somewhere, you know? And so like one thing that hasn't stopped since Joe came out is like I've been writing consistently. So I'm always working on new scripts. I'm always developing new projects with some of my cohorts. And like right now, I've got basically 2 scripts that I'm circling to figure out how to make them next. And it's one of those processes that like you start to realize that the only thing that you can do as the creator is make the decision. You go, I am going to do this no matter what. And when that process happens, everything sort of takes care of itself. And I have not done that yet. I have just been consistently like, okay, I've got this script now. I've got this script now. I've got this script now. I don't know yet. And you know, and then the pandemic obviously put everyone's plans on hold. And now that the tide is kind of shifting with that, it's making me I feel like I'm kind of waking up and going like, okay, all right, like it's plausible to make a film again. You know what I mean? Well, it will be soon, hopefully. And so like I was actually just talking to my father, who plays my dad in the movie.
Nice.
And I was telling him like, hey, I think 2022 is the year that we're gonna shoot another something, you know. So, you know, we'll see how it goes, but you never know until it's happening.
Right. Right. I really appreciate your honesty, Justin. That's one thing about you. I feel like you don't have a filter. And and it's a good thing though, because I'm kind of the same way. And it's like the more you get more comfortable in your own skin, you're like, I'm just gonna say this because it's how I feel or what I believe or you know
Totally.
what's going on right now, versus that kind of glass wall or the kind of the status quo response. You know, how are you? Fine. Like you just said, I'm not fine. I'm in the middle of a crazy storm of like my movie was about to start and now it's completely at a halt or you know stopped, and now I'm moving on to new projects. It's really refreshing to kind of just remove all of those pleasantries, I guess, where we just kind
Totally.
of say, oh, how are you? I'm fine. Let's
For
dive
sure.
into some of your favorite stories that light you on fire and just get you excited. Like when you were younger, was there anything that jumped at you and you're like, whoa, this is something I really love?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is I have been on like a huge nostalgia kick lately of just like, you know, I used to, when people would kind of go down memory lane, I used to be like, ugh, like, come on, guys. you know. But now, as I get older, I'm 33 now. You start going like, hey, it's okay to like go back and revisit um, uh, sort of warm spots of your life, right? And so I went back recently and rewatched a movie that was like truly sort of transformative to me um, at the time, and even in hindsight, it was transformative to the industry. But Toy Story, right?
Okay.
So I vividly remember seeing Toy Story in the movie theater and like being really confused, like, wait, what is this? Like, what? You know, like it's like it's not real, it's not hand drawn. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And I remember just being so unbelievably, um, you know, really the moment when when Buzz and Woody are on the rocket and the rocket shoots up in the air,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, this is the point where rockets explode, you know. And it's like, not today. And then, you know, he's like, Buzz, you're flying. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm falling with style. You know what I mean? I vividly remember that feeling of flying, you know, that
Yeah.
sensation of like, oh my gosh, anything is possible, especially when we have each other, you know.
Mhm.
And that theme is something that has always I've always been drawn to that theme. And so like really, I would say that kind of the foundation of a lot of my storytelling impulses really come from Pixar in many
Mhm.
ways, because it's, you know, almost all of their stories are about some incomplete hero that meets their counterpart, and at first they don't like each other, and then over time they realize they can't live without each other. And in a nutshell, that's kind of what Then There Was Joe was about. You know, it's structured in a very similar way. But yeah, I would say, I mean, I rewatched Toy Story like 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't seen it in probably, I don't know, 5 6 years. And dude, it holds up. It's so solid. It is so perfectly structured, perfectly. It's tonally super consistent, um, iconic in every way. I love that film. So yeah, I would
That's
say Toy Story.
fantastic. Have you heard of the story spine, which is the structure that Pixar like officially calls it?
Yes and no. I haven't heard it referred to as story spine, but I do know that Pixar has a very methodical way that they structure their stories. And the thing that I love the most about it is just how simple their stories are. They're
Yeah.
masterfully simple.
Yeah.
And the more I write, the more I realize like simplicity is difficult to achieve. It's not lesser than complexity; it's superior. And you know, as I'm sure you know, when you're trying to write something, it's like sometimes your brain can go in a million different directions, and just trying to find the one thing you're trying to say, the one thing that happens next, is really challenging, you know, because you have to make a choice. And when you make a choice, in many ways, choices are kind of violent, you know, like when you make a choice, you eliminate all the other possibilities. And it can be kind of scary, you know, because sometimes, like, as you get deeper and deeper into a project, it gets harder to unmake choices.
Right. Right.
um, you know,
Yeah.
but I love it. I love how you know, um, how focused and concise Pixar stuff is. But yes, yes.
All right. Let's go back just to that topic of making a choice. And
Hmm.
you're kind of teetering, and you're on the fence. You're like, well, I could, kill this character, or, have this character live. One of those definitive choices.
Hmm.
What do you do when you're at that point and you're like, okay, I can have a happy ending or a sad ending? What are you coming? I mean, are you just embracing the fear and just saying, I'm willing to be wrong? I'm, are you looking back at the earlier parts of the story and saying, okay, this is what I've set up? How do you approach it, Justin?
That's a great question because I feel like every project is a little different. Um, I I recently finished a script where I knew the first maybe 90 pages, and the last 10 I didn't. I didn't know what happened.
Oh man.
And I was just like, you know, and basically I think what my process has become, just over lots of fits and starts and failures and ups and downs, is like you start to realize, like, the thing that I'm at my best as a storyteller when I'm leading with my intuition.
Mm.
Like there's different like layers to the process. Like there's the, at least for me, there's like the mathematical side of the process. That's very like, okay, let me try to structure these events in the maximum, or the order of maximum effectiveness, you know. Um, but then something happens sometimes where, yeah, you get to a moment and you're like, okay, this mathematically makes sense, but it doesn't resonate in my heart, you know?
Yep.
And I've allowed my heart to veto the structural process. And so like I usually, and a lot of times I'll fight it for a really long time. I will be like, well, no, it makes sense for the story to do this, considering everything I've set up, everything I've been carrying around. But sometimes it just doesn't feel right. Like there's something that it's just like, I know, but my heart wants to go this direction. And it's a risk, because that's when you can lose people.
Sure. Yeah,
You know what I
that could be a
mean?
turn that rears
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, you can really take a turn and lose people. And as I get older, I'm realizing that like following my heart is the most important thing. And if I lose people, that's okay, because like sometimes the ways that we diverge from each other is what allows us to see the differences between each other in a way that hopefully is empathetic and timely and honest more than anything. I think honesty in storytelling is really the hardest thing that I'm always fighting that, because like there's always a pressure sometimes to think of like, okay, well, what would be the thing that will get the most reactions out of people, or what will land the most with the most people. But at the end of the day, um, I'm at my best when I go, hey, this story means the most to me. Like, and not saying that I don't write movies for other people. I do. I am thinking about the audience and what the audience is expecting, and what they're thinking at every moment. But the departure from what's expected sometimes is kind of sometimes the reason why I wanted to write the whole thing in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah. So I usually just let my heart dictate what should happen.
Play to your strengths, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because like that is one of the, yeah, it probably is my greatest strength, and my greatest weakness is like I can't do something that doesn't feel in alignment with myself, you know?
and especially since you're the writer and director, you're seeing your baby, get brought into the world, and you're watching your baby kind of develop and grow before you. It makes a lot more sense versus, okay, I wrote this screenplay and now I'm selling it, and someone else will bring it in. But
Totally.
you're kind of from the moment of conception, so to speak, and you're nurturing that, and then, okay, here it is. This is a
And
part of what I made.
totally. And filmmaking is such a slow process. My God. Like, I mean, maybe it's fast for people who have lots of money and connections and things like that. But like, when I realized that nugget, the thing that makes you want to make it in the first place, like you must put that inside of a box, inside of your heart, and lock it away and protect it,
Mm-hmm.
because everything around you is going to try to take that away. And what's also weird is like I've noticed that like when you're making something, very rarely uh, is it better than than the script itself. I'm
Right.
just being totally
Right.
honest,
No,
you know?
you make
Yeah.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
The script is the highest, point that it will be probably in my head of just like, oh man, this is it.
Right.
And then everything from there on out is just like a reduction. It just,
Compromise of sorts. Yeah.
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 And it just sort of goes down, and you're always trying to just keep that from going. It's gonna go down, so you just try to keep it like not, you just don't want to plummet,
Yeah.
as long as it's kind of in the general thing, like
Yeah.
that's all I'm trying to do most of the time, is just protect the integrity of the project, which is hard to do, man. It's really hard to do.
I can only imagine. I remember this little clip Ron Howard said. It was like from Masterclass. Like, hey,
Yeah.
every time you make a movie, it's just going to break a little bit of your heart every time. And
Oh,
I now
absolutely.
with your context that you just gave me, because I've never made a movie like that. I'm a writer. I'm not a filmmaker, but that totally makes sense, because if you're taking the script and then it's evolving, and every choice you make is going to be a little different than that image in your mind, which,
Totally.
not to tangent, but it makes me really think of Stanley Kubrick, where he was the ultimate, perfectionist, taking years and years and years to plot out movies and going through so many pictures and boxes and sending out photographers, scouting locations and all that. He was wanting to match up like those images in his mind. Okay, this
Yeah.
fits that
Yeah.
doorway. He
Yeah.
sent out a photographer for a few days just taking pictures of doorways.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this makes sense, because we're really trying to match up that visual story with that one you wrote on the paper originally.
Totally.
Um,
Oh my gosh.
that really brings it together. And I don't know if you've ever seen this
Yeah.
one, Justin. I think it's called Kubrick's Boxes, where it's literally
Mhm.
just his warehouse of all these boxes from all his movies that, like the behind the scenes, essentially, including
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
Napoleon movie he never was able to make. And
Right. Yeah.
um, it just from what you've said, it makes me realize how many movies went how far in production but never came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's every movie that gets made is a little miracle. I mean, it's I feel like I had a lot of naivete on my side when I started making Joe, and now, like, after having gone through that experience, and it was full. I mean, it was full of mostly downs. Like, there weren't that many ups. I'll just be very honest.
Wow.
It was mostly soul crushing in many
Oh,
ways. But something good happens with that. It's like everything you thought that you were and everything you thought this project was sort of withers and dies in your hands, And then you sort of look at it and you go, I'm still here. Oh wow. Wow, I'm still here. And you're changed. And you're changed because of that process. And now, I don't know if it's good or bad, but now I'm way more cautious about, like, what project am I going to do next. And that's why I've had such a hard time sort of picking the next thing that I want to do, because I've been pumping, like, since Joe has been released, I've probably written 10 screenplays.
Wow, that's incredible.
I've just been pumping them out. It's been very arduous, a very arduous process.
Sure.
But I've none of them have, oddly, I feel like you have to want to lay down on the train tracks to make a film. Like, it has to be the one where you're like, this is the one that I'm willing to die on that hill for.
Wow.
And I haven't yet come across that project that makes me want to do that. And I have to have that in order to go out, raise money, devote 3 to 4 years of your life to a project. It takes that box in your heart, like I don't feel like I've totally found that yet. But I can sense, it's almost like a physical sensation, because filmmaking is a very physical process. I'm realizing that my body is almost longing for that experience again. Because I think it's taken me a really long time. Because I mean, like that movie drained me. I mean, like, sure. It like crushed me in many ways, and I feel like I have spent the last maybe 3 years just trying to recoup the energy that I expended on that, and now I feel like I'm kind of at least back to some semblance of normal. I've reached some equilibrium that is tipping in the favor of like, hey, let's do something kind of crazy again and make a movie again.
And then the pandemic set you back a bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what you're showing up, you don't write 10 screenplays by chance. You're showing up. And this, again, not to even discredit what you did before Joe and all the work that you put into Joe, but 10 screenplays is a lot. That's easily 1,000 pages right there that you wrote during quote unquote downtime. So I think it's super inspiring. It's like you can frame that in what, in our minds, we frame everything. We tell ourselves a story even with that. It's like, oh, well, I have 10 screenplays, but none of them are giving me this feeling to go, lie down on the train tracks, like you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that doesn't mean one of them won't tomorrow or even tonight.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? It's
very
I
true.
guess you can kind of step back a little bit. 10 screenplays is incredible. And I just, as an outside party looking in, I would say you could easily make a few of those books. You have more options today, to tell stories than any other point. I mean, totally. I know I would listen to a podcast with you reading some of your screenplays. I think that'd be kind of interesting and fun, especially if you had more than just you.
Yeah.
It could be pretty engaging. I mean, just a different dynamic. But there's so many options now at our fingertips. It's more I think the challenge is mental energy. Like where are we putting that focus?
Dude, yes. Mental energy. My goodness, dude.
Tell me what you think about that, because I don't want to share my thoughts as much as learn from you.
Dude, mental energy. Oh my goodness. That's a really, really great jumping off point. Because I feel like during the pandemic, I went through one of the biggest, and I don't know, I don't want to call it writer's block per se, because like there's a connotation to that I don't know if I subscribe to, but I feel like I forgot how to write in the middle when the pandemic started, and I realized a lot of that was because my routines got interrupted pretty dramatically. Everybody's routines got interrupted. But I didn't realize like how much I had built my writing process into my my neighborhood where I used to live. I don't live there anymore. But like so much of my process was about getting out into the world. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Sitting and watching things, and you know what I mean, and being very active in my writing process. And then when suddenly it's like, don't go outside, don't do it,
Right.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, and it took me a while to learn how to recreate my process with everything closed down,
Yeah.
But I feel like I became, and it was a very, very painful process, incredibly painful. Because like there was probably like 3 months where I didn't write anything, which
Oh,
is
wow.
unusual for me. Very, very
Right.
unusual. Yeah. And so like and during that process, I was struggling a lot with just depression, getting very sad. I struggled with
Sure.
depression a lot. And so like I had to become very mindful of what I was allowing into my mind. That being like, obviously, I mean, the last 4 or 5 years have been, you could safely say pretty toxic. The media has been very toxic.
Sure.
Social media is very toxic.
Absolutely.
And so like, I think the pandemic made me realize like, whoa, I really gotta be a lot more mindful with like the media I'm consuming, how being aware of like, am I anxious?
Yeah.
And because like that's the biggest energy drain for writing, is just being anxious. It's it's like what's interesting is like I feel like people who are a lot of my friends who are really great writers are naturally very anxious people. um but like it's the writing impulse being unproductive, because a lot of being anxious is just like inventing narratives
Right.
about the
Yes.
future
Sure.
that may or may not happen. They're probably not going to happen. And like I've had to really, really take a lot of stock on my mental energy of like, where am I spending it? Because it's limited. It's very limited. And as I get older, it feels like I almost have less of it every day. So I'm like, I really have to like be very like now my writing process begins when I wake up.
Wow.
It begins in the morning.
Okay.
And like my writing process now is literally like a series of steps that it's like an
Wow.
almost an hour long process before I sit down. And all of that to me is writing. It's kind of like you're speaking of masterclass. Steph Curry has a masterclass, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and his masterclass was really eye opening to me, because you watch Steph Curry play, and he's like this acrobatic, you know, shooter, like shoots all these really bizarre, crazy shots, and
Yep.
his release is so quick, it's difficult to guard. He changed the NBA, obviously,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Big time.
But the thing that I found that was really fascinating is he talked about his warm up routine. And his warm up routine begins with him standing super close to the basket, like way close to the basket, and shooting 10 shots from the front, from like 3/4, and then from the side and things
Yeah.
like that. And he just basically like makes his rounds, and then he'll shoot all those shots really, really close to the basket until they're perfect makes. And then he'll take a step back and then repeat the process, take a step back, repeat the process, take a step back, repeat the process until he's at the 3-point line. And his philosophy behind that is you don't just walk into the gym and start chunking up 3-pointers. You have to build your shot,
Right.
and you build it from scratch. And I feel like with writing, I have to build it from scratch every single day. And the days that I don't, I can feel it. I can feel it when I'm writing. The words don't come as smoothly. My brain doesn't work as well. It's a more chaotic process. So when I make the time to warm myself up, myself being the instrument, because I think that as writers, we sometimes don't. It took me a long time to realize that we are the tool. Like our physical bodies are the tool for writing. It's not the computer. It's not. It's us. And if you're in a good place, like probably your process will be in it. Like if you have good process,
Yes.
you will probably have good product.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think that's so important. I remember years back you said in an interview that one of the keys to kind of unlocking your writing was to be willing to just write terribly, to not try to hit the bar and, hit grand slam home runs every day, but
totally.
just to show up. And with what you said about, the rhythms and the mindfulness and kind of showing up as being so essential and like having that process in place, you've noticed that you've been able to hit it a lot more often than not. You're still having those strikeouts, but you're okay. You're showing up and you're not like, okay, I'm done. Enough of this. I'm going to go do something else. I'm not a writer anymore. You're not throwing in the towel at all. You're actually, finding a rhythm.
Well, what's interesting about that is like I do show up. That is true. That is I would say one of my strengths. However, like especially during this last year, I have wanted to give up. That's 100% the honest truth. I have wanted to give up numerous times.
Okay.
In fact, like I declared to one of my really great friends, I'm like, because I recently finished a script, and I was like, I think this might be my last script.
Wow.
I think it might be my last one.
Yeah.
I'm and then obviously like, fast forward a month or two and I'm writing something else now. It's like it's habitual, it's a habit,
Yeah.
but I definitely 100% struggle with wanting to quit all the time.
Wow.
All the time. All the
Really?
time. Yes,
Really?
yeah. It may not seem like it on the outside, but
That inner
literally
story, the inner narrative.
oh my God, the inner narrative inside of my head is usually not kind. It's really not.
How are you sticking
And
with it then? I mean, if you're constantly playing that inner narrative of
yeah,
I'm done, I'm giving up, I'm quitting, how are you still at it? How are you still writing? How are you still thinking, one of these I might want to turn into a movie?
yeah. I honestly think it's just habit,
Mm,
like I've been writing uh, consistently for about 10 years now.
okay.
And so like I feel like when I'm not writing, things feel weird, you know?
Mm,
And I try to, I very much have a love-hate relationship with it. Um, and I'll just have like really bleak moments where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
yeah.
But how you get through that is precisely, and that's a John Borhaus technique where he says like you should just write awful words. Just
Yeah.
the secret of good writing is writing badly, and uh, that has always been something that like when I find it hard to put words on the page, which is frequently, it's frequent. It's always difficult. Like every single time I write, and I have a really great writing day, I'm like, wow, it happened again. Wow, like it never ceases to amaze me. I'm like, wow, I actually sat down and I did it. I have to constantly remind myself of that. Hey, you can write stuff that nobody sees. You can do that. Like
Yeah.
like most of these screenplays that I've written over the last few years, like most of them have not been seen by anyone. Most of them are
Interesting.
just like in my little vault
Yeah. Yeah.
of scripts, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's interesting like that perspective, because you were like, oh man, that's really awesome. But to me, I'm like, well, yeah, now I have 10 things lying around doing nothing.
I get I
So
get that. And that's again the inner narrative on that. And you can say it's
right,
half full or half empty. You're
exactly.
obviously getting something out of this though. Despite
Yes.
the pain, despite the challenges, what would you say you are getting out of it? Out of all the storytelling that you're doing on the page or on the screen?
it may be selfish to say this, but I'm getting catharsis out of it.
You are.
That's really all that it is. It's
Yeah.
like I write usually because something is bothering me,
Hmm.
like or there's something that I can't stop thinking about. And usually when I write it and I get it out of my head, I stop thinking about it and I can kind of move on and go to the next thing. And you know, I think most writers have very overactive minds. It's just like always running at all
Yeah.
times. And like I think that's why not writing feels really bad. It's a really bad feeling because it, for lack of a better term, excuse me, but it's like being constipated.
Yeah,
It's like I can't.
that's a fair
Yeah,
analogy. I like that.
exactly. It's like I can't get it out. Oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's always coming back to the basics of just like, hey, writing is a process. The first time you put words down, they're not going to be in the right order.
Hmm.
You're only most of the time you're only working with the vocabulary that you have currently in your brain that
Hmm.
moment,
Yeah.
which means you're naturally inherently going to not pick the best word on your first go. But
Whatever's
like,
frame of mind. Yeah.
exactly. And so like I have to constantly remind myself, hey, this is a process. And the first try doesn't even count. So
Right.
like most of the time, like, and it's just a little trick, but I'll on my files, um, I'll write whatever the title is, version 0.
Mm.
And it's like, hey, this one doesn't even count. Go to town. And I know that sounds perhaps very
It's little,
silly.
but it makes a
It's
difference.
little, but it,
Makes a
it has made
difference.
a tremendous difference in my life. Like for some reason when you go version 1, you're like, okay,
Right.
all right now, but
It's
so,
like
so I
now
try
it's
to keep
real.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So I always try to keep it at version 0 for as long as possible.
And I think I've kind of been doing that in little, unique ways for myself. Like
Uh-huh.
I'll write a little short story. This is kind of a JD Salinger trick. At least he's one of the first I know that tried it, where you write a short story, and if it has wings, keep writing more. Like Catcher in the Rye was originally
Yeah.
like a little short story, and
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, if I write a short story and it scratches the itch, so to speak, maybe there's more here. And
Hmm.
there's lots of stories. I think that it started off as something little, and then it
Totally.
kept growing and growing, and before you know it, hey, ooh, this is a novel, or hey, this is a novella, or whatever. I could see that even applying with any kind of story. It's like you start small, and you never know where it could go. You don't want to
Absolutely.
assume much.
100%. Yeah. Like I have, what's interesting is that uh everybody talks about content. We need content. We need more content, which is like a very devaluing term to what it is that we do. But in a weird way, it's kind of a healthy way of looking at it. Because like at its most basic, content is something that takes up space on the internet. It's really it. It takes up space in our lives. It's like a a delineation. It's an object that is something that we can consume.
Mhm.
Um, and as I you know try to navigate this crazy time period, I've started to realize that like all that we have to focus on is the thing that we're doing. Like I used to get very hung up on like, what is this? Is it a pilot? Is it a screenplay?
What's
Is
the
it
definition
a
of it?
not? What is it? You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a good question to ask, but also it's a lot more fluid than that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like not everything is so locked in, and everything can sort of be repurposed these days. You know, you can take
Yes.
something and spin it into something new.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've underutilized, but I have very much started thinking like, oh, well, a story is however long it needs to be.
Mm.
However long it needs to be. You know, there used to be, like in screenwriting, there's you know, if you buy a screenwriting book off the, you know, off the shelf, it'll say like, hey, 110 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how long it needs to be. 120 is really long these days. It should be 110, you know?
Right.
Well, the reality is like every story is different, you know, like the story I just finished is like 98 pages, you know? And as I get older, I like shorter is usually better. You know what I mean? Like if it's shorter, it's probably better than what it was.
A little more
You know,
refined.
it's not a hard
yeah,
and fast rule, but yeah. But yeah, I've just been trying to be more content agnostic, if you will.
Yeah.
And just focus on like my craft and like whatever it is, like because I was going to shoot a web series this year as well. So I had a web series I was gonna shoot, but the pandemic ruined that. But it'll probably get turned into something else. Like it might get turned into a podcast or something. You know what I mean? And being open to that, to whatever the content wants to be, I think is kind of a good place to live.
I like that. I always refer to this quote from Bill Belichick. Not that I quote him very often, but it's manage your expectations.
Absolutely.
And when you manage your expectations and you say, look, it's going to be as long as it needs to be. And it's cool to say, hey, I'm writing a novel or I'm writing a screenplay. That's all fine too. But you just, once you kind of set some boundaries or some guidelines up and you can say, okay, this is what I'm doing. But if we don't put anything there at all, and I'm not saying you want to do this day one of a new project either, you know, you have to give yourself some space to play and create, but having, you know, some expectations, be like, oh, you know what, I just want to put this story out in any form. I know that's a different kind of expectation, but hey, as long as I put the story out there, you know, versus not sharing it at all.
For sure.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. So somebody said this to me yesterday, and it's like, I've heard it before, but they said it like the most perfect moment. They were like, hey, done is better than perfect. And I was like, dude, yep, you're absolutely right. Done is better than perfect.
Any words of advice for other storytellers out there? It doesn't matter if they're a director or screenwriter, even musicians. I see your guitar in the background there. You know, storytelling is storytelling. And I feel like there's so many forms. We've talked a bit about, you know, the harder parts, the parts that no one truly mentions that much, which I appreciate your honesty, Justin. I knew you'd come bring in your A game with the honesty, no doubt.
Right.
But anything else that comes to mind, like, man, I just wish I knew this earlier on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. A few things. The first thing is that you do have a voice, and it deserves a space. You deserve to take up space.
That's right.
You know, as a Black man in America, that's difficult. It's difficult to constantly remind yourself, like, no, I can be here.
Yeah,
I can say something. It's okay for me to say something. It's okay for me to have an opinion. It's okay for me to share it. You know, I struggle with that all the time. Like, I feel like my output in the last, like, I have been creatively extremely productive in the last 3-4 years. However, I have not released a lot of work. And a lot of that is fear. A lot of that is just plain fear. Fear of like, oh, well, you know, I don't know if I have the right to say this, or if what I'm saying is too obvious or whatever. But like, I realize a lot of times the things that are the most obvious to you, the writer, not obvious to everybody else. Not obvious. And so a lot of times just saying what is very clear to you is actually a very selfless act, because it can open the mind of someone else. And so my main piece of advice would be to trust your voice, which sounds very cliche, but also it's nuance. There's some nuance there, because like I think also when you're writing, sometimes I can get very self-important, right? When you're writing something, you're like, this is the most important thing in the world, you know? and but then you start to realize, like, no, you know, like, it's not though. It's not. Like, if somebody's not reading your thing, they're gonna be reading somebody else's thing. Or if somebody's not watching your movie, they're gonna be watching something else.
That's a good point.
So, you know, that's not a bad thing. That's not bad. I used to think that you know, like, oh, if somebody's not watching my thing,
you haven't been selected or something. Yeah.
Exactly. But I'm realizing now more than ever that is a strength. Like, no one is sitting around waiting for my next movie. No one is. Like, I mean, you know, occasionally I'll get an email from somebody who's like, hey, what are you up to? I you know, when's your next movie coming out? You know?
Right.
But in reality, there's no one who's sitting around thinking that, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own lives, their own things that they're doing. And so like that can actually be a strength, and can actually take the pressure off as a creative, to know like, hey, you know, it's going to take however long it needs to take. No one's waiting for this.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, do your thing. And like, that's taken me a long time to kind of embrace. But know that like there is no pressure. The pressure is only coming from you, and to trust your voice. It's only internal, right?
Yeah.
It's not coming from anywhere else, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin, for being a guest here on the Storymaking podcast. How can people get in touch with you or follow up with you? Because I know they're going to find so much useful information, or maybe they want to watch Then There Was Joe, which I do recommend. It was a really great movie.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So we, you know, and we didn't get too much into this, but I intentionally went the you could call it the alternative distribution route. I had multiple distribution offers for Joe, but I didn't feel like the distributors sort of understood the DNA of the movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I set up a little streaming site at watch-joe.com.
Nice.
So you can go to watch-joe.com and check out the movie there. You know, like, and we can, I don't know, we'll put up some sort of like promotional code for anyone listening.
Yeah, you bet.
And I'll just send it to you.
Sure, that sounds great, Justin. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see it get out there.
Something.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And so anybody who's listening, I'll shoot Jim a little code for you, and you can watch the movie for free. So
I love it. I love it. You can't beat that. That's amazing.
That's right.
Thank you so much again, Justin. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, man.
You bet.
Appreciate it.